Okay. Hi, my name is Lindsay, and I'm interviewing Mr. B about the 80s. So, can you tell me what you remember about the 80s?
Boy, the 1980s. I remember at the end of the Cold War, President Reagan was elected, and Mikhail Gorbachev and him. There were a lot going on, and we had the fall of the Berlin Wall at that time. I remember the big scandal in our day was the Iran-Contra affair, where we were selling weapons to Iran, and the CIA was using money to overthrow a government in Nicaragua that we didn't like. 1980s. Beginning of AIDS. Nobody knew at the time how bad it was going to get, but the first cases of AIDS were reported. I remember Krista McCullough. She was a teacher. She was the first teacher sent up in space on the Challenger spaceship, and it blew up like 74 seconds after takeoff, and so that was pretty tragic. So there were a lot of things to remember about the 1980s.
So, did you like President Reagan?
You know, the 1980s are considered the me generation, and there was a lot of, hoarding of money and trying to get ahead. And I understand it. 1982 was a big recession. You know how they say we're in a recession now. Those were tough times. Just so you know, the minimum wage back then was like $1.30 an hour. I was a full-time teacher, and I was making like $16,000, $17,000 a year.
Wow.
So it was a lot different than it is now.
Okay. So why do you feel the way that you feel about President Reagan?
I think he was good for the country in that he brought a lot of optimism, and I think that's very good. But I think governments have a responsibility to care for the poor. And if all you're doing is thinking about making money and getting ahead, you can't forget that there are less fortunate people that you have to be responsible for.
Can you remember any main events that happened in the 80s?
Like?
Like, let's say,
my kids
like
were,
September 11th.
Oh, like dates?
Well, it doesn't have to be like bad, but can you remember?
I remember fun stuff like my kids. Like those, they're all growing up who were buying Cabbage Patch dolls and Smurfs, they were called, and Nintendo was big in those days. So there were a lot of times. I remember a lot of the movies. Movies were like E.T. I think people still know or remember E.T. On Golden Pond, which is a lot older people. There was just Star Trek, The Breakfast Club, Rain Man. It was just a good time to go to the movies and be entertained.
Who were the main celebrities? Who was really famous?
Like on TV, it was like Bill Cosby, Jerry Seinfeld. Roseanne had a show, Roseanne Barr. And I think it's still on today, but there's a show called Married with Children that started in the 1980s. So those are like the popular things on TV. In music, a ton of people. In music, you have the start of Madonna, Michael Jackson, Whitney Houston, U2, Bruce Springsteen. I was into music, so Stevie Wonder, Pink Floyd. There was just a lot of good music in those. The Commodores.
Was drugs a major issue?
Yeah, I think drugs has always been with society. We were just getting, back then in those days, there was a lot of, we were just getting over the heroin thing, where people would take needles and put it into their arm. I think drugs, it's been a persistent problem for the country.
Where gas prices as expensive as
Oh, no. In fact, during the recession, one of the things that President Reagan did was to release more oil. And so there was a significant drop. I mean, gas was starting to climb, and then he just said, we're going to let go of some of the reserves. And that's, I think, what helped. One of the things that helped in the recession is he started to get the price of gas and food down so people could go through it.
What was fashion like?
Oh, fashion? You're asking the wrong one.
Yeah.
It was kind of a conservative time. I mean, in the 60s, it was the bell-bottoms and the hippies and all that. And then I think it was getting more professional, business-like. That was kind of what the 80s were into.
Yeah. So if you can change one thing or anything about the 80s, what would